Tēnā koutou.
O e mihi ana ki a koutou te pai. E te pai kāka wahanui. E te pai e tau I tēnei wā. Kia timo, kia rānonga. E nei hua I roto I a koutou. I roto I tēnei rōpū e hui mai nei, mai ngā tōpito katoa o Aotearoa, e te ino ahi tereiri anō hoki, engari he Māori. E mihi ana ki a koutou katoa. E te whānau. Wow. I feel the array of reflection coming off my screen right now. E pia katana. Oh, I'm just blown away by this immense power and awesomeness. I'd like to ask you to just paku mihi, ki tēnā, and when you do it, whiu te rākau ki tētihi atu. So I'm gonna hit up Te Wehi Wright, seeing as he's so Ngāruahine humble, and ask you to introduce yourself, e te wanaunga, and then head over to another panelist. Kia ora tātou.
Tēnā koe e whaia mauri ora kia tātou katoa. Kia tō waitia ngā mihi ki te wāhi ngaru, o te anō rā rātou mā I tēnei te rima ngāhuru tau o te petihana o te reo Māori, nāna I reo Māori ai tēnei e noho ana ki wainganui a koutou tēnei wā, anō rere whakamānawa tia ana e rā kota. Tikana te kōrero he Ngāruahine, he te Arawa, he Ngāti rangitihi, he Ngāti Kahungunu ki te Wairoa anoho ki tēnei. He oe anō rā, he hoa rangatira, he pāpā anoho ki, he ringaringa, he waiwai noa no te amokura no rere, e mihi ana I tēnei kaupapa a tēnā koutou.
Ka tuku atu ki a wai, wa?
Ka whiu I te rākau, ki a koe e te pāpā e Trevor.
Hoi anō rā, kai te rau hihiri tēnā tātou katoa. Kua tūhono nei hei rau I te hiringa mahara e haere nei I roto I a tātou. Trevor Moeke come off the eastern seaboard of the North Island of New Zealand.com, the world. Kia ora tātou. Tukanatu ki a koe, Paula ngā mihi, Paula.
E te whānau, tēnā koutou katoa. Ai, ko Paula Rawiri tōku ingoa, he uri tēnei no Tūwharetoa, no Ngāti Ruanui, and have really proud roots from the north of Ireland as well, in a little place called Whintana. And so it's really great to be here with you all this afternoon. Tēnā koutou. Ka whiua te rākau, kia koe Māhina.
Tēnā tātou katoa, tēnā tātou te pai e noho nei, kia kōrua hene rangi rāua ko Shannon, ki te ope whakahaere hoki I tēnei tino hui. Ko Waiau, he uri ahau no Ngāi Tūhoe, no Ngāti Kahungunu, no Ngāti Porou hoki, ko Māhina rangi Melbourne tōku ingoa. Ka whiua te rākau ki a koe Erina.
Kia ora Māhina.
Kia ora te whānau. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Ko Erina Kauika tōku ingoa, I te taho tōku māma, no hoki anga whakapaukara kia ahau, I te taho tōku pāpā mai maki tū ki tongariro, ko te Arawa tōku waka. E mahi ana ahau ki PwC, engari nai nei, e noho ana ki te kāinga mō tāku tino mahi, he mahi mahama ahau. Ka pai. Kia ora, Shannon.
Kia ora, Erina. Tēnei te mihi ki a koutou katoa, ko Waiau, ko Shannon Lomax, tōku ingoa, hure au no Muaūpoko, nai Tuhoe, me Ngati Kahungunu ki Wairoa. I'm calling in from the lovely Ōtautahi, so when I joined this panel, I was a public servant, but I've come over to the light side and recently joined Te Runanga o Ngāi so working for iwi now too, which is amazing. So kia ora koutou, awesome to be here.
Ka pai, o tēnā koutou katoa kua hono mai I tēnei wā, and wow, you know, caliber, scucksness, I mean, I'm just overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed and I'm very, very happy. But before we, you know, quiz you on some gnarly pātai, we have a small icebreaker, and I believe you were all sent some cards in the mail, and I hope you have those cards in front of you right now, because we're going to discover and better understand the differences in reanga we have amongst us. And maybe, you know, regardless of the age, you may all enjoy the same things in terms of social media. So, first pātai for the pie. Pātai tuatahi. Facebook or Instagram? Instagram, Facebook. Tuhoe. Oh, both. Okay. I see. You know, someone's got to always remix the rules, don't they?
Yeah, different times.
Ka pai. You know, all good. Cool as. Here we go. Pātai tuarua. Twitter or TikTok? There's a pretty clear yes. Very good, everybody. Wise decisions. Yeah, nice one, Erina. Ka pai.
My nieces told me I'm not cool enough to be on TikTok though, so
Kei te pai. Hey, kei te pai. TikTok sees no age, so you know, no mai. Here we go. Another easy one. iPhone or Android? Are you normal and you have an iPhone, or are you a weirdo with a Samsung? I mean, sorry, do you have a Samsung?
Alien.
Ka pai. Kindle or paperback? I mean, for me, it's neither. But you know, you're all scholarly people. Kindle or paperback? We have paperback. Oh, and we have Kindle. Ka pai. Lies to Wehi. That's a lie. I know you don't read.
You didn't have any, you know, Rainier Harrison's option wasn't on here, so I just had to go with those.
True. Yes, podcast. Ka pai. Last one. LOL or KTK? LOL or KTK? KTK. LOL. Okay, it looks like some of you may need a real Māori pickup. That's okay. It's fine. No judgments here, you know. All good. Hoi ora, awa hand back ki taku partner in crime. He rangi. Tēnā koutou.
Oh, e te whānau. I think I was off trend on some of those things, so I'm glad that I wasn't sent those cards. Far out. Ko paake haerea au. Hei a pātai tuatai ki tēti I tokorua, Meki, to Erina and to Trevor. The question follows as is. Our tupuna navigated the stars and moana. Our tamariki Mokopuna are navigating the matrix. What advice do you have for our tamariki Mokopuna to ensure we take our culture with us in the digi and the tech-driven future? Kia koutou Erina, we'll start with you.
Ka pai tēnā koe ni rangi. Hey, I had prepared like a few notes and, you know, I was trying to get myself ready because I haven't talked to many adults in the last 10 weeks with our new baba. But actually, on our way to kura this morning, on the kura drop-off, my 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old, was just dropping some whakaaro for me. So I think I'm going to share that story with you guys this morning. So he, Micah, our big boy, is starting kura next week. And so we're going for a visit this morning. And he goes, Mama, I like kura, but when I get there, I get a bit whakamā to meet people. And so my mum instincts go into overdrive, and I'm like, oh, here's a life lesson opportunity. And so I said to him, kei te pai tama, when you feel that feeling in your puku, that whakamā feeling, that's your tupuna telling you that something important is about to happen. And you can feel all that excitement inside you. And that's all good. So what you got to do is just be yourself. And he's like, okay, Mama, yeah, sweet as. I don't think he realized that I was being so serious about it. Okay, be yourself, all good. So he goes off to his, visit, has a couple of hours, and he's got me wrapped around his finger because we stopped for hot chocolate on the way back to Punareo after his visit. And we're having a bit of a kōrero. How did it go, Tama? He's like, yep, it was cool, Mum. I met some new people. I was like, oh, cool. That's cool when people get to know who you are. And he's like, yeah, and it's cool when I get to learn about other people too. I was like, oh, yeah, ka pai, it's cool you connect with other people, when you're at kura. He's like, yep. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then we get on our way back to Punareo, and I'm telling him that I'm going to come and have this kōrero this afternoon. And he's like, oh, what's your kōrero about, Mum? And I said, oh, it's about how we get our rangatahi and tamariki moving forward into te ao mua. He's like, and I said, oh, what's your whakaaro tama? And he goes, I'm ready. And so, you know, he just dropped a few little bombs in that, you know, in our morning. And the messages that I took away, which I think really resonated for me, was listen to your puku. Hey, you feel these feelings and you have all these emotions. And actually, if we think about it from our perspective, it's our connection to our tupuna telling us something. So don't be afraid of it. Lean into it. And then be yourself. Be yourself is the way to navigate those feelings when they come up. And then make connections with other people when you're in that space and when you're in that new environments or different environments. Make connections with people who you like to have fun with. In this case, I think they were playing Kimi me te huna. You know, that's where you'll find your joy. And then, you know, and then, you'll be ready for whatever comes in the future. Yeah, so a little story from my morning being a mama. And yeah, hopefully that resonates both for our tamariki, but also for us as people who work in and around the public sector. I think we can follow that same kind of approach and model moving forward.
Meharo. Tēnā koe, Erina, ngā mihi. Nui ki a koe kōrua ko tō tamani. Ka pai. Ka tuku atu ki a koe e Yoda. You know who you are.
How do you actually spell that?
Starts with a yo.
Yo, tatou. Kia ora tatou. I think we ought to start with that. Mokopuna is, you know, he's born ready. And this is not a delay, and this is not a denial, because God is incapable of denying. It's just a delay. Doesn't mean deny. And if we jump into the middle of a matrix and we understand the reo of the matrix, we come to some simplicities. 10101010 is the basis of the binary coding that began the digital revolution. And digital and tiki is just tiki. How it adds lives value, how it adds stories, how it comes to life in our life. You know, I saw some aliens before instead of iPhones. You know, we're just tribal these days. And so 101010 is relative to that Mokopuna, because that's all about io. Io nui, io roa, io te mataho. I take a mai I ne ahuatanga mai I te kukunetanga o te tangata. And if we look at the word Mokopuna, and we look at the word tipuna, the Tirohanga Mokopuna demands that we think about puna. And puna is a wellspring of mātauranga, of goodness, of those feelings inside that Mokopuna on his way to kura this morning. Mauri ora tuahine. Give that boy a PhD now. You know, o marama aia I te aiotanga tō tatau. So, you know, what does the advice mean? I think it goes like this. Sometimes we say, take our culture with us. We are born in our culture. He kakano I ruia mai I rangi atea. The kōrero motuhake is where we're getting back to. And in getting back to it, it's making revelations to us that we can carry forward as mōhiotanga, as mātauranga, as maramatanga. But equally, you know, give me a break, you know, our tamariki Mokopuna ama uba papa. I know that's a trendy term, but I do Uber Manaki. He's my Mokopuna, and I'm on Uber call day and night. You know, Uber Dosh, Uber Drive, Uber this, Uber that, Uber everything. And if you think about it, the proximity of the Mokopuna and the Tipuna skips the Mātua. I'm not saying you're irrelevant, but you're under-relevant in the dynamics of the Io and the 101010. That was always motuhake. And let me explain more, because I know there's some PhDs on this call. it goes like this. 10 is actually about the imprint of the tipuna in the tāmoko of the Mokopuna. I can hear you breathing. Kia tau pai e nei kōrero, right? So in one sense, we already have motuhake. In one sense, this call is an example of they already had the vision for us. And we just got to make up our minds. Are we the voyagers or the settlers? Are we the builders or the wreckers? And how do we take that forward with us? I suggest that we're already motuhake. The second thing I'd say is when you do 101010, it reminds us that it's binary and it's a minimum of 2. And if you think about Te Ao Māori and ona kupu rangatira, kotahi tanga. Unity is the word kotahi tanga, minimum of 2. So that baby and his mummy this morning, that Mokopuna and this Tuhoe of ours this morning, minimum of 2. The unity that they were displaying already is the kōrero and the vibe to get this digital matrix going. Am I doing all right so far? Henerangi?
Kōrero.
Anei we tai atu o ngā whakaro. So what does that mean for carrying us forward? Technology can add value in our lives, but equally it could just stay stasis like water, air, houses. It's how we use technology and how it adds value in our lives and what new solutions. I come out of a place called Wānanga. Ka tū te ihi, ka tū te wana. And I'm actually a bit subversive around this because I think we should start doing wā worldwide wānanga. Because I think that around the taiao calamity, around the dynamics of capital, around the dynamics of political exclusions, I think we're right on song that Mokopuna and his plea to us to hono, to aroha, to pono, and to tika. So, do learning and education and kura, not schooling. Do shift or stay home, build, not wreck, dismiss whatever offends our souls, and rethink what we've been told. Kia āio anō, kia tūkaha tātou I rote te Tirohanga Mokopuna. The edge is the innovator, not the center. And so some of those kōrero this morning, I saw some of those edgy Maui natives are already doing tech and technology and going very, very fast in their kōrero. So I just pause there. If you want me to say any more, ask another question. I'm not averse to some more.
Ka pai. O tēnā koe matua and korua ko takituahine Erina. Ka pai te kite a koe and hikama, geez. I almost need like a new brain to take in all that kōrero. I don't think I'm smart enough to comprehend what she said. Hoa no rā. Tēnā koutou me ara whakaro and you know, yes, like I said, not smart enough to take in what I heard. Hoi no rā. My mind is marinating on that. And while it marinates, I'm going to go over to our next panel members, Paula and Te Wehi. And your pātai is, what is one key issue in the intergenerational digi-native space that the Crown and iwi could be partnering better on? And we'll start with you, Te Wehi.
Well, kia ora tātou e mihi ana ki ra whakaaro e te pāpai Trevor. Just before I start, I just actually wanted to highlight to everyone that in that game, Sonny forgot one more piece of paper. And I'm not surprised because he obviously didn't learn it at Hatokaura, but he said he does it at home too. And that was either the washing or technology. So don't worry. Oh, Maku o whārua e whakaki.
Hey, I'm the MC here. Answer my damn question.
On that note, I think the pātai beforehand is probably a good place to start, I think, for me. And in terms of what both kaikoura before me just said in terms of navigating the stars and navigating the matrix. Our people have been navigating the matrix for a long time. And it was only probably until at least Te Reo Māori was offered that we started to learn the language of the matrix, and it wasn't in Te Reo Pākehā, it was actually unlocking Te Reo Māori. And so since that time, I think we've only been able to offer up and our value and our superpower in what we will probably come to call the alternate reality. So I think picking on that point, Matua, in terms of we have been navigating the matrix for a long time, and it is unlocking Te Reo Māori where we're going to actually be able to continue that. Otherwise, our language is always going to have to react to the progress or development of technology, because that language isn't necessarily in Te Reo Māori. Here no, I think the relevance of that whakaaro to my part, to our pātai, is probably in that kōrero about partnership. So I'm yet to actually see a successful example of partnership where Māori and the Crown have really worked together proactively and productively. And ara no ngā tauira hei kōrero pia mā tātou. But one of the things that we have seen is really strong examples, going back to Papa Trevor's example, Kura, of when Māori are given the means and the resourcing to actually take a kaupapa to the stratosphere. And so I think that's really where I want to take some of this kōrero. And I know there has been some kōrero about mana o rite, but I don't know, personally, I feel quite adverse to allowing the Crown to gift the Crown the word mana. I think Kāwanatanga is an awesome place for them. Ana ka noho te mana motuhaki kia tātou te iwi Māori. And the reason why I say that in terms of answering this pātai is because it's been interesting, like COVID has presented some pretty interesting issues on both sides. And one of the big ones for me is probably in connectivity. And to highlight, our tamariki today are actually better connected globally than we are domestically. And so I think there are huge opportunities for us to figure out that those components of connectivity, service delivery, and provision support for our whānau. And going back to that first example of allowing them to better navigate the matrix that they have only been navigating, that they've been navigating for a long time. And so we probably do need to take stock, evaluate our current processes. I mean, a lot of the mahi that I do is engagement, and I think the frameworks of engagements that we utilize are still from when Papa Trevor was young. And so, we need to figure out how we can better utilize technology to really push and start creating a world, kua Mokopuna. Tērā te kōrero I puta ia Papa Trevor, ko koira ke te mātāpuna, he mea I take I runga, he mea ka hua mai raro. Ana me hoki anō tātou pia ki tērā ki te mātāpuna o te ki. In terms of, I don't know, it's interesting. So actually the caveat here is, e hara I te mea nōku anō e nei whakaaro. One of the best things of my mahi is that we get to be really well connected. And so ko e nei whakautu, he whakautu o te takitini. And that's because I had to go out and make sure that, test my own whakaaro, test my own culture, to make sure that it's actually reflective of the needs of our people. And in that, and I think Kiri might have referenced him, I don't know, he'll be okay with me talking about it. One of my good friends, Te Mauri Kingi, and he's been working in this space for a long time. And one of the things that he really emphasized was, we need to try and develop frameworks and rejig our system to create the next Māori Elon Musk. E hare te mea me Elon Musk rawa, but that's the trajectory of our conversation. And so, it is in data sharing, data storage, data security, data infrastructure. And with that comes obviously the wider taiao components of that discussion. It brings to light discussions about spectrum allocation. It talks to 5G, 6G infrastructure moving forward. But I think the key thing for us is actually changing the trajectory of our kōrero. I saw, I think just yesterday, there was a kōrero about a Māori engineer who helped propel a rocket to space. And I think that's the trajectory of the kōrero that I think we need to start having at home, just so that the trajectory of our kōrero actually matches the trajectory of the potential of our kōrero. And so it is about interstellar. We're talking about navigating the stars. We can actually navigate the stars. We're talking about navigating the matrix. Well, that's old news because we're actually looking up. So I think it goes back to tētahi kōrero I te te oku kroua. Wai mari au te noho ki te te oku kroua, and he was well known for a lot of his sayings. One that he used to use quite a lot was the trick to walking on water is knowing where the stones are. And I think with every generation, we have an opportunity to reveal or to unveil where that next stone is for our mokopuna, so that eventually they can get to where they need to go. And it talks about matter of perception. I guess the difference between impossible and possibility is that knowledge and understanding where those stones are. And so I think moku ake koira, it is a combination of there are system levers that we need to change, but I think it's the mindset and going all the way back to what Papa Trevor was talking about in terms of Te Reo Māori. That's the language of the matrix. And I think if we can start embedding that a little bit more in our homes, that's going to change and change the course and the trajectory of our conversations. Because like Wai said before, our tamariki are already there. We just need to keep up. And tērā te whakatauke ki ena, ko ngā rohenga o tō ao kei ngā rohenga o whakaaro, ko ngā rohenga o whakaaro kei ngā rohenga o tō ao. But the boundaries of our world are determined by the boundaries of our mind or our thoughts, and then the boundaries of our mind and our thoughts are determined by the boundaries of our world. So, koira. Tēnā koutou, e mihi ana ki ngā kōrero.
Tēnā koe te wehi. Whoa, geez. I didn't know you were so clever. But
I had to get those from other people.
No, but I think you totally bridged some of the kōrero that Matua Trev was touching on around, especially around the boundaries of the mind and being a voyager or a settler. And I think finding those touchstones or those stones in the wai as once you've found that, you're pretty much halfway there. And so tēnā roa te koe me o whakaaro, and now I'll hand over to Paula to share her perspective around what are the key issues that what is one key issue in the intergenerational diginative space that the Crown and iwi could be partnering better on. Paula.
Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koe te wehi mō whakaaro rangatira kia tātou I te ahiahi nei o te rā kia koe Trevor, Erina. I guess I've thought about this question as a leadership challenge. And the reason why I've done that is because I think that if you think about it in the context of a leadership challenge for the public service and for Te Ao Māori, you can equally think about it as a personal leadership challenge for every one of us who's at this event today. Because I do agree that to give effect to the development of good public policy, to make a real difference in the lives of all people, we need to use the intergenerational diginative space and really harness it so that it's not wasted. I did my pepeha earlier in our kōrero, but just to give some further context to me, I am a mama, I'm a daughter, I'm a cousin, I'm a wife, a sister, a niece, an auntie, and a friend. But I did have to go to Wikipedia to even understand what diginative refers to, and which in itself might have some of you worried now before I continue on in my kōrero. Because I was really interested in this concept. What is that? I've heard things about it, but I thought I needed to do a little bit of research myself. So, koe anō, e ai ki a Wikipedia, which, and again, it might have some of you worried. Diginatives consume digital information and stimuli quickly and comfortably through devices and platforms. Instant gratification and reward systems are important, distinguished because they were born within the advent of the internet. So, obviously, I'm not part of this generation. I am a proud 80s child, but I do have children born into this age, and therefore some of this description was quite familiar to me. Anyway, back to the kaupapa. That's my context, and that's what I bring to the table. It would seem to me that the intergenerational diginative space is fundamentally a vehicle for sharing ideas and aspirations, regardless of the kaupapa. For us as Māori, this isn't a new idea, and we've heard parts of that already. But what could be new is how we use the potential of this diginative space to ensure that it becomes a place where everyone can belong, can feel safe, and can feel secure. So the one key issue in the intergenerational diginative space, that is such a mouthful, that the Crown and iwi could be partnering on, from my perspective, is ourselves. And by this I mean specifically two things, focusing on two things: our relationships and our ability to think. If I turn to relationships first, if we're able to harness the potential of relationships then we need to first start with trust. And trust can be created through a mixture of character and competence. And by character, I mean operating in a way that's credible, has a high sense of integrity. In other words, do what you say you're going to do. And by competence, I mean having the skills and knowledge and ability to deliver on results. If you think for a moment about the people who you truly trust, more often than not, they'll have a combination of these things. Conversely, if you think about people who you don't trust, they will be missing some of these things too. If I turn to the ability to think, thinking is often an act that we don't think about, but it's something we ought to put more effort into, because often it's not done particularly well, and when it's not done well, it can have devastating effects. But the good news is we can strengthen our ability to create a thinking environment, because it requires two things: the ability to listen with respect, interest, and fascination, and the ability to ask really good questions with a genuine interest in what the answers will be. So if you take a moment, when you listen, do you listen to win? Do you listen to advise? Or do you listen to really learn? Next time when someone is talking to you, notice how you are listening and see if you can move yourself to a place, because more often than not, you're probably listening to win, which means you're listening, or you're listening to give them some advice, as opposed to maybe trying yourself to move from that place to a place where you're listening with respect, interest, and fascination. Similarly, when you ask a question, do you ask it not even caring about the response, or knowing what the answer is going to be already, or is going to be, or needs to be, or do you ask it because you're genuinely interested in the response and that you might learn something from it? So yeah, there are significant issues, and some of them have been touched on already by Te Wehi, that are facing us. Climate change, water security, digital inclusion, the stubborn inequities in education, housing, and health. However, I think without a decent focus and dedication to working on ourselves, and in particular our relationships and our ability to think, then it would seem to me that we will only ever achieve partial success. So I would commend to you, as my final words, is this idea of self-trust. If we believe that relationships and our ability to think and create thinking environments is the key issue to working in partnership between Crown and iwi, utilising this digi-native space, then it starts with us, and self-trust is key. And by self-trust, I mean having confidence in yourself and who you are and what you bring, so your place, having the ability to set and achieve your goals in your own way, your space, and being prepared to keep your commitments, walk your talk, and inspire trust in others, your pace. Kia ora tātou katoa.
Te atāua hoki, mi aro.
Atāua. Ai, koina. Tēnā no koe kōrua, o tino, tēnā kōrua te Wehi, Paula. And you know, your kōrero, Paula, about creating an environment to think. I think we do need to back ourselves, and I do think we need to sometimes marinate on some of the hōhonutanga of the kōrero, and not beat ourselves up if we don't have the stomach to take all the kōrero. You know, sometimes you can't eat kina without having had a little taste of it for a bit, and sometimes the richness of the mātauranga is beyond us because we don't have the stomach, the intestinal fortitude to be able to actually digest that kōrero. And I just wonder, e te whānau, how we take this kōrero today to also enable us to just take a bit more, and even if it tastes kawa, if it's a little bitter, suck on it for a bit, and then just figure it out. Anyway, e te wānau, he pātai tuatoru e haere mai ana, and this pātai is for Shannon and for Māhina rangi, e te reko o tō ingoa Māhina rangi. So the pātai is, and it's a bit of a monster, so I'll say it slowly. Now more than ever, we are turning to virtual to connect, to work, learn, live and love. How can we be more innovative in maximising the opportunities of tech for whānau to connect, to be creative, to access, to achieve, to build calibre, that stomach, that intestinal fortitude, to elevate our culture. So, ka tuku atu ki a koe Shannon, te tuatahi, kai a koe, tēnā koe.
Oh, kia ora. When we kind of use words like innovative, we think of big flashy things that we should be doing. But on my view as public servants, I think actually we need to kind of get back to basics in these spaces. I hold a strong view that as public servants we'll always be ringawera at the back and enablers, or whilst we're whānau members and whilst we're Māori outside of the Crown, we can kind of play that leadership role. But as public servants, we should always be at the back. So what I know is, and what we all know is that our culture is being virtualised. Whether we like it or not. And with COVID, it's happening at pace in particular. We see whānau and they're connecting on multiple levels. We see rangatahi contributing back to their marae without even being at their marae. They're participating in iwi politics, and they don't even have to physically be there anymore to do that. So they're engaging more because we live in this digital world now. We see our stories and our pūrākau being retold through digital means. I mean, new life is being breathed into these stories through ebooks, through virtual reality and mixed reality. And we see access to te reo. There's more access to te reo as we have online platforms and online communities to kind of share in that. So our culture is being virtualized, and there's all these kind of controversial questions around like how do we uphold the cultural integrity? And these questions have come to the fore today too. How do we protect te reo? The other day, my nieces, who told me I was too uncool to be on TikTok, also had a full-on conversation using only emojis. I had no idea what was going on, but we've seen the evolution of language through this digital world. So how do we protect te reo? And also, as we see whānau contributing without being physically there, how do we still encourage them to go home, because it's still important, that physical connection. So as our kind of culture is virtualized, whether we like it or not, whether there's answers to these questions or not, as public servants, we have a role in that I think isn't a leadership role, it's an enabling role. So we need to kind of create an enabling environment for these things to happen. We know there's a huge digital divide, for example. We have whānau that can't access because of affordability or connectivity, so they're not actually getting a chance to participate in some of these spaces. So whilst COVID means we're building all of these programs and cool, innovative, big, flashy things for whānau to get involved in, we're not sure that kid that lives 10 minutes up the dirt road from Ruatoria is actually accessing this. So we need to, as public servants, keep that in the fore of our minds when we're developing policy and initiatives, that there is this digital divide, and we need to make sure that we're kind of continuing to close that gap so all of our whānau can participate. We need to develop pathways. So Lee Tumutumu, who talked earlier today, we need to start promoting and continue promoting people like that, because it's important for our whānau to see themselves as leaders in this space. They should have the opportunity to be architects instead of just consumers of the digi and technology worlds. So we need to be promoting people like him who are leading the way. We need to be creating those vocational pathways and educational pathways and promoting those as cool things for kids to do. And I think we're doing that. We just need to continue doing more. So like I said, it's kind of just back to basics. And we also need to build trust with whānau, show them the benefits of what the digi and tech world does, particularly those who aren't engaging as much, build trust in data collection and storage, and all of those types of things. So I think we've got a real role as public servants in the enabling environment space to ensure that whānau are kind of are participating. But for me too, another key part is that we as public servants, we need to lean into it more. We need to use technology, even if we don't know how to do it. We need to start becoming, whilst we weren't born into it and we're not necessarily digi natives, we need to get on that waka anyway. We need to consider it when we're developing policy and stuff. We need to absolutely invest in it. I'm talking to all of the people who are in funding making decision places, and we need to be investing in it. Back in 2017, I project managed at TPK a social media campaign that was targeted at rangatahi Māori. It's called FFS Vote, or For Future's Sake Vote. And basically what we wanted was the rangatahi to go vote at the general election. And so we used the typical kind of social media humour things to get them on board, and they came on board. But we also used real innovative stuff like augmented reality and virtual reality. And because of our innovation to use that stuff, what we saw was that they started passively engaging with the campaign, like, oh, that's funny, haha, we'll laugh and thumbs up. to actually actively engaging when they started tagging their mates and saying, bro, we should go vote this weekend. So that's the power of the public sector using these innovative tools as well and leaning into it and using them, is that we can engage Māori more in this space, which I think is a real responsibility. So I guess my only real key piece of advice is, again, to go back to basics sometimes. We need to be courageous in this space. Technology can be expensive. It can be scary if you don't know it, but we need to be courageous and be pushing it and continue to push and challenge the envelope a little bit. So again, our whānau have the opportunities and can see themselves in this space, is the key point from me. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Shannon. Ka tuku ki a koe, Māhina.
Te rawe o ngā kōrero clearly should have advocated to not have to go sixth after this amazing panel. Look, my whakaaro is I love a good social media and internet wormhole as much as the next person. And it's no substitute for going home. So my kōrero today is about how we encourage each other to be real about what we can and can't get from our tech solutions. There's a lot of themes in my kōrero that pick up kōrero that some of the other panelists have picked up as well. Do you guys have that function set on your phone that keeps a record and tells you how many hours you've spent on your device a day? I don't need my phone judging my screen time. Does the total screen time even matter when we use the device to replace a multitude of gadgets, tools, and other household items? Is 10 hours too long? I looked at what I did yesterday. I bought my niece her birthday present from a Māori-owned business I found through a friend's Insta post. I admired some rāranga Patrina I went to school did over the weekend, even though I haven't seen her in person since I left secondary school in 1991. I caught up with my big girl on her day via text, direct message, and by watching her Instagram story. I listened to some new Māori music featuring taonga Porou written and performed by the son of a wahine I've known since I was little. I caught up on some commentary pieces a couple of Māori writers had written. I looked at some photos of my mum and her siblings as babies, some of which are over 70 years old, in the album of over 6,000 photos and 156 videos that I carry in my phone. I watched multiple videos and a variety of live streams on the operation to disband the protest at and around Parliament. I spent an hour on the awesome Te Hiku Media website researching for this kōrero and learning about their whakaaro and kaitiaki principles relating to iwi data ownership and sovereignty, steps to create tech jobs for iwi members, and developing Māori voice recognition technology. I scheduled reminders in my calendar for my next whānau land trust sui. I emailed 2 teachers from my youngest daughter's school about her online learning. I checked my bank account, I paid bills, including my fortnightly marae koha, and checked the Hapu Facebook page on the monthly fundraiser numbers. I checked in on the whānau group chat so that people knew we were all safe and away from the protests and the fires. I checked my work emails on the train and contacted colleagues by text. I scanned the weather forecast and sent text messages to my husband so he knew when to pick me up from the train station. I read 3 chapters from my book and completed 3 work and 5 personal Google searches. I synced my Fitbit and I scanned into 7 locations and showed my vaccine pass twice. All of these things that make me feel grounded, informed, connected, part of a collective, inspired and uplifted. Are they things that allow me to access services and information and undertake whānau management tasks that keep us organised and cared for? Are there options in here for me to express and celebrate my identity as an Indigenous wahine and a global Indigenous community, and with many expressions of my reo and culture? Does it replace that call to go home, or negate the need for me to see my mama Ākanohi after she did the whole of Tāmaki Makaurau lockdown alone? Is it the same as gathering our whānau in the whārua to mourn and bury my godfather? Or swimming as a whānau under the bridge in the waters of our awa, Te Tamāhina Mataroa? Or being in the kouta of Te Rewirua, knowing how the kitchen functions and the jobs to be done, knowing that the disapproving looks will ease and people won't hassle us for being rāwaho if me and my girls put in our hours. Ehe. Or being at the homestead, cozy in our sleeping bags, marae styles in the garage, surrounded by cousins, chomping grapes before the wasps get them, getting dark ruatoki soil under our nails and over our feet. Ehe. We aren't generic Māori. We each have a whakapapa, a whānau, hapu, whenua, awa, maunga and moana. We have meta, tikanga, waiata, kupu, mauri, and kawa. You can't learn who you are, reverse disenfranchisement, and connect to where you are from, and pass that on, and exercise ahika from your phone. Hei kona.
Phew. Me aro.
Ka whai. Oh, kua ngū tō reo e te Tuhoe.
Oh, thank goodness we didn't. We didn't put a bet. We didn't put a bet on who would do that first. I would have lost. Māhina, Shannon, te miharo o ngā whakautu ki ngā kōrero. There are so many elements to what we do with technology, and I would love a transcript of both of your kōrero. Te hōhonu o ngā kōrero e huama. We have a couple of pātai that are in our Q&A for this session, and they have come to us from Isaiah and from Eden, and we're going to try and get to both kōrero, but I'm going to go to this one from Eden first. And if there's anyone from our panel who would like to respond to this, pai ana. The digital space has fruit and opportunities that also trap our whānau, i.e. disinformation, misinformation, intellectual assimilation of mātauranga and identity. How can we keep whānau safe? And what role does the Crown have in keeping our whānau safe? Mā wai e whakautu. I might head actually over to Shannon. To you, Shannon. Where do you think? What, with all of the misinformation and the assimilation of our mātauranga, what is our role? How do we as public servants Māori keep our whānau safe?
Yeah, and we've seen it through COVID. I'll use COVID as a great example. We've seen so much misinformation about vaccinations and mandates and everything else out there. And what we're starting to see digitally is little pop-ups where you can actually be redirected to spaces that have that knowledge. And I think that's a real key way that we need to be promoting and discouraging misinformation. The issue is that where do we get the mātauranga that sits behind that? So where do we get the knowledge and information to kind of, dispel some of these myths that are being put out there? And I think that it's the Crown's role again to create the enabling environment for that type of digital technology to dispel some of the misinformation. But the actual mātauranga needs to come from outside of the Crown as well, that we need to be relying on the people out there that do have the real knowledge and the people that speak, like Matua, Trevor, that can kind of inspire whānau to actually listen to the right information, I think is a starting point anyway.
Kia ora mo tō whakautu. Te wehi, he kōrero au e pāna ki tēnei pātai, mea ha tātou.
Oh, yeah, tēnā koutou e tautoko ana i ngā kōrero. I think there's a couple of things for me. I know that there has been a bit of work in terms of establishing digital tikanga, and gratefully I think Kiri Kōwhai and they might be leading that space, so it's probably a better place to answer that. As far as intellectual assimilation, I'm lucky enough to have some part to play in, I guess, the overarching response to Y262 and IP being a really big component to that. One of the things that we, I guess in that kōrero is intellectual property rights or property rights in general are far cry separated from how we operate as Māori. So I think there's a huge, I think going back to what Shannon was saying in terms of enabling environment, there are systemic barriers within the IP system that actually are not wide enough for us to actually be able to. The first question is whether or not we want to go that path in the first place, right? And then the second one is if we do, then how do we make that particular pathway more reflective or responsive to mātauranga Māori? And in terms of having the answer to that question, they're probably way, there's the Lanao Tufferys. They're the people who are probably eating that day and night, and they'll probably be in a better place to answer. But going back to the main point in terms of establishing and forming those enabling environments, I think leadership will go a long way. And going back to what I was saying about the difference between mana orite and then the concept of kāwanatanga and mana mutuhaki, I think if we kind of go back to those fundamental principles, and kōku whakaaro noiho nei, I think that will give Māori enough of an opportunity to actually redefine that space ourselves.
Tēnā koe, tēnā no koe. Hey, he pātai anō tō tātou. This just has come in from Dwayne and whānau. If you're wondering where these pātai are coming from, they're coming from the Q&A section of our app today. So from Dwayne, kei te tautoko ngā kōrero, any whakaaro on the virtual space maintaining tikanga and emergency response mahi, challenging kanohi ki te kanohi, even more virtually. Paula, do you have any whakaaro there about, the maintenance of tikanga and emergency response mahi? How do we look after each other and use technology to our advantage when we can't be face-to-face together?
Yeah, he pātai pai tērā. I was just thinking about what struck me is there's still the people element and I guess I continue to have a lean around relationships and manaakitanga and looking after people. So I think the idea of again, it's kind of the virtual space to me is like it continues to be a vehicle. And it's an enabler, but it's not the only. It's shouldn't replace the people and the relationships, which you can still be kanohi ki te kanohi virtually, like we are today. But similarly, you can have a human aspect by picking up the phone and calling people, which might be a bit old school. Well, it probably is actually old school talking on phones, but I think that they continue as a tikanga. They continue to have a really important place in any response that we're part of. Is what I would say to that.
Erina, did you have any responses to any of the questions, Tuhine? Channeling your boy.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting this kōrero about maintaining tikanga in a virtual space. And I know we had an example last year of running a virtual hui, and the question was what is the tikanga, what is the kawa? And when you go to a space or you go to a place, you go up north, they've got a tikanga and a kawa up there, and you know how to start off a hui and how the hui is going to flow. But we're kind of creating that as we go, and even more so, I guess, in the last couple of years. But I think it's, what we ended up doing is it's kind of the kōrero that Mohe had earlier about coming from your worldview and your knowledge, and bringing that into a space to do what you know is best. And I think in all of the different places where we sit, that's kind of the role that we take, is to bring our knowledge and our mātauranga, and we check it first, and make sure it's kind of tika, not just your own whakaaro, because it's and we kind of just build it as we go. And I think we trust that, as we step into these new worlds, like our tupuna did way back when they had to step into new worlds, we're kind of doing that as well, and carrying that knowledge with us. So, yeah.
Yeah, tēnā koe te tuahine. Thank you for your whakaaro on there. Matua Trevor, I know that you've probably been pondering all the kōrero that has been shared, and we were wondering if you had any final thoughts around what the panel has discussed today.
Kia ora tātou. This is an amazing panel. It's broad and deep all at the same time. It's intuitive and informed all at the same time. It's technically literate, and it's emotionally expansive. And therein lies our challenge. Some of us have got miles and some of us have got hope. And I think that's enough. So ngā mihi ki toko ono tapu. Rawe ngā kōrero. I did see a apartheid. And I'll tell you why I think like that, just to offer something else as a comment. It's no longer about IQ. IQ went with the dinosaurs. It's now about CQ and EQ, and I'm going to throw in TQ. Intelligence quotient, cultural quotient, emotional quotient, maybe tupuna quotient. And these little arrangements around how we've seen tangihanga in play on Zoom, how we've seen Facebook karakia wānanga waiata sessions. And we face a challenge as a culture and a people because we've graduated from the akanohi to the ardigi in that space. And Shannon and others were enunciating that pretty well. So ngā mihi. I saw a question that was about, more the public service tata. I think that the public service is already Māori in a lot of ways. We just prefer the binary of the assimilationist thinking, and we need to liberate ourselves from that. I saw Kiri Kōwhai earlier, and she reminds us that actually data analytics is the new enabler, and possibly even the new surge disruptor. And that might help us with where we kind of place our efforts. I loved Māhina's kōrero about her 10 hours on her digi device and what it all did. And all of that was value to how she operates, but value to how she goes home. I don't think we'll ever have a replacement for, the paradox or the paradigm of digital and particle. That's why I showed my book when you asked me those funny questions at the beginning. Now and again, I need to feel a story. Now and again, I need to feel some whanaunga. Now and again, I need to actually feel the kinas. And I think we're kind of just going to be built that way, but perhaps pivot. Last question I came from, I think it was Eli or somebody. It was asking how principle, policy, procedure, and protocol, what is the Te Ao Māori thinking perhaps around that? And if I could close with two thoughts, I did think that in a tipuna, in a TQ space, you would go, is it tika, yes or no? Tika is the base word of tikanga. So that might give you the principle. They might even give you the policy. And then you have to ask yourself, is it pono, yes or no? Does it come from a space of truth? Does it ring the bell right? Or is it a bit wonky, yes or no? That might give you a policy or a procedure. Is it aroha? Does it reach that baby in the dusty roads of Ruatoria? Or not, yes or no? Does it serve, or does it show compassion to those we serve? You've got to ask that. And I think the last part is more about this partnership and relationship thing that's been a theme. Does it hono, yes or no? And so those might be 4 little tick boxes that we want to run ourselves by. The last thing is, kia mai a tātou. I heke mai tātou I te ao motuhake. I don't think we're the settlers. That's another crowd. And I don't think we're the assimilators, I think we're the innovators. I heard Kiri Kōwhai's question, and I think it's an and. We have to both iterate and innovate. Anoinera katira. It's been a real privilege being alongside this team, and thank you for inviting me along. Hoi no, tātou. Tuia, ruia. Haumie, huie. Tai kie. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Tēnā
Kia ora
koutou.
matua.
Ai, ngā mihi kia koutou. He nui ngā kōrero ki runga i te chat, hei mihi kia koutou katoa. He nui ngā hua o tēnei whakawhitinga kōrero. Māsien, te waiata e tautoko ana i o koutou kōrero. Mauri ora e te whānau.
Kia ora hene rangi.
Kia ora.
Māui.